Well, he did not disappoint, did he? Did he? I tell you, John Coe is a visionary, and I did not know we were going to end with off-planet zoos, but he is indeed a visionary. I was thinking of dividing. I don't know how these tables are divided exactly. I think somewhat randomly, but maybe tomorrow we'll divide with the pessimists and the optimists. And I don't know where I'll put John Coe because I could find both in that presentation. So, panel, react to this. I have a first question, John. Is the unzoo a zoo because does it not, if it has a fence, ultimately still involve confinement and some degree of coercion? Or, by the way, I did not just intend to define zoo as a place that does confinement and coercion.
Yeah, thanks. That's the first question. I try to always define the unzoo as an evolving concept. And it is evolving outside of zoos all over the place. In Tasmania, there's a beer garden, and you can drink beer and look at the stream and watch the wild platypus. You know, that's an unzoo. In Victoria, you can go to Phillip Island, and you can pay $75 to go to an interpretive center and then walk down on the beach and watch the little penguins come in at night. And you can't touch them, but they surround you. And that $75 goes to the protection of that species and their research, and they're tagged, and they're satellite monitoring them all over the sound. And so that's an unzoo. So they're all around us. We just have to recognize them and then see how much of that can we incorporate into the zoo. So I don't think you just go out and build an unzoo. I think you look at how your zoo can evolve in that direction, whether it's within your present boundary or some satellite program you have with western pond turtles outside the zoo. Don't define it in terms of the barrier, define it in terms of progress towards a collaborative relationship with nature.
Panelists? Don Moore.
John, there are a lot of keepers and young up-and-comers in the audience today, and you suggested that we are going to be exporting our technology, but we should avoid exporting our cultural bias with that. They may be involved in those exports by working in other countries. How do you suggest they not export our cultural biases?
The first law of relationships is respect. And if you go into a new relationship or look at an old relationship from the point of view of respect, you know, I'm working with, you know, tribesmen and, you know, very, very dangerous men in the mountains of Afghanistan. And they're fabulous people. And showing respect to them is the difference between living and dying, to put it bluntly. But it's not hard. These are amazing people. But then, you know, from that perspective, you have to really, like we started with, question your assumptions. Okay, how can I help you achieve your vision in ways that don't offend my vision? Don't, you know, and yeah, you know, you'll have to compromise sometimes. You know, it is a work in progress. You can't totally be a purist. But I think the first lesson is to do your homework, learn about the people you're going to be dealing with, and then just come in with a very open mind, and then whatever they do, give it a try, you know. If it's getting drunk at a banquet and you've never been drunk, well, get drunk at a banquet. You know, everybody else is, you'll learn a lot.
So you students who are taking notes, just to put underline under get advice from the panel is get drunk at a banquet. So let's do what I suggested, which is it's now time for the next presentation, but we have this block of time now. So let's use 15 minutes to process some of the questions that have been submitted. And I submit these questions to the panelists, so you're to respond to these. And some of them you're uniquely qualified to respond to, so let's try to do this. There's been talk about the design of future zoos, and at least 3 questions pertain to the notion of a viable economic model of what's possible. So let me pose 3 questions. Is it economically viable to imagine a zoo that is only local wildlife? it's been offered that's possibly a good idea for at least some future zoos, that they only feature local wildlife. Yeah.
I want to address that. My zoo is a small zoo. We get no public support in terms of operating dollars, so we earn 93 cents of every dollar we spend. I think it's about the richness of experiences with animals that you offer people, not the exoticness of your collection. Now, our collection is exotic, but I really believe it's that palette of experiences. So you let me design a great palette of experiences, I can use native wildlife to do that just as well. And that means a variety of things, a lot of which are very active and personal. So I think that's the defining thing. We tend to get caught up on collection. It's not collection. Although people desperately want to see some things, and we have to address those needs, it's what you do with them and the sort of experiences you provide. So I think it can be economically viable without question.
Thank you. Monica Phoebe.
As far as I know, there are more native wild animal parks in Europe than zoos with exotic animals. And most of these native animal parks are in private hands, whereas most exotic zoos are in public hand.
Please.
One of the things that has not been discussed in most of these design situations is the population of animals concerned. Unless you're going to keep taking animals from some wild pool, if there is any, you have to have genetically and demographically viable populations. And those are fundamental design elements. And you really have to begin with the wild animal populations that you're going to sustain as the first pillar in the tower of concept that we need to get going. But I'm afraid that that has not received much attention.
I think that actually segues into the next question. It's related to this, and it has to do with this. Is it economically viable to have a zoo that is populated only by injured and rescued animals? I have no doubt this question stems from motivations, thoughts about animal welfare. A lot of people are coming to feel sad or sorry for healthy animals in confinement, but feel somewhat better or even good about the fact that an eagle with a broken wing has been given a home and can serve a function of display. Monica Phoebe.
I was involved in the design of a sanctuary of 2 hectares. I don't know how many acres this would be. Quite small, 6 bears. And people spend there 1 to 2 hours. So that is feasible. There's just a lot to do around these 6 bears.
John Fraser.
I just want to suggest that these conversations about economic viability aren't about a 100-year future. They're about a very limited economic thinking within the current paradigm in our society that is a dead end, because it's economically viable to take care of one dog that's left behind by Leona Helmsley until the end of its natural life. But really, what is the scientific enterprise of the future zoo? Because zoos, one of the things I think they carry with them with some integrity is that they aren't simply for public pleasure to see animals, but really advanced thinking. As Jeff was saying, there is so much we know about wildlife based on the models that are in captive collections. And so as we think about a more distributed kind of definition, like Ken was suggesting, we need to also move beyond the idea that somehow gate revenue is even remotely related to what we can imagine a zoo can be. If we think about it as a scientific enterprise that contributes to society and advances a greater culture, then the economics will follow.
This is great. Ron Kagan.
Yeah, I think we are more than a scientific enterprise. I think society expects us to be more. You know, we are involved in a lot of animal rescues, and one of the things that it actually helps us do is tell stories about our relationship with animals, whether it's the 2 racehorses that we rescued or a circus bear. It actually gives you a way to connect to somebody that makes it very real, as opposed to this general concept of population of gorillas in Africa. And clearly those things are sustainable, and I think unfortunately they're going to be needed for many years to come, because there's so many exotic animals that are in situations that need rescue. I know this is controversial, and it's not my intent to get into that, but I think it was telling for us when we decided not to have elephants anymore. There was great concern that this would affect us at the gate, and this was some 5 years ago. At the time, we were averaging 1 million visitors a year. We're now averaging 1.2 million visitors a year. Clearly, the economics don't prevent you from engaging in activities that are compassionate and also consistent with science, but are not limited to just having exotic things.
This is there are really many other really excellent questions here. So, Kevin Murphy.
I just wanted to comment on what Ron was saying. If your mission is to participate in breeding programs and sustainability, or attempt to, and you're constantly taking in rescue animals, you are actually sort of negating your own mission on some level. Holding space is always limited. So how do you accomplish that?
Well, I'm going to talk about it later this afternoon,
Okay,
but
never mind then.
we think we need to do both.
All right, let me squeeze in a few more of these questions. We have a few minutes. One question is for all of us. It's an architectural question. Is so many zoos are burdened with buildings left over from the past that are problematic and not of good use. How can we in the future avoid doing that to our successors? How can we avoid burdening the future with the unwanted buildings that we presently build?
Stop building buildings.
Is that clear to whoever posed that question?
Bill just suggested that maybe the pyramids could be taken down because they are, after all, not functional today either.
If you have to build buildings that are big enough and of such a mass and of such stature that they attain those sort of hallmarks that require them to be saved, then you're building the wrong sort of buildings in the zoo.
Donna Fernandez.
Well, it depends on what your goal is in your community, and if you're in a community like Buffalo where we're really proud of our architectural heritage, we make an effort to try to retain that as part of the character of the community. And so I think that those of us who are located in areas that have historic buildings have to really work within that and try to preserve that, because that is a testament. It's a snapshot in time, as well as there are ways to alter the buildings and still make them viable for today's standards. But I don't think we should just tear down anything that's been built.
And by inference, build ones today that 100 years from now they'll be happy to inherit. By inference, that's the implication in your answer, is we've inherited good ones from the past and we should build good ones for the future. I infer that. Eric Trump.
Can I go on the assumption that many people have already made that 100 years from now global warming will be a significant factor in our lives, and suggest that maybe zoos will need to go indoors because of the variability in the climate, especially particularly in a place like the Northeast where we might get very hot summers and very snowy winters, so that the mega building may be the zoo in 100 years that's absolutely required because we simply won't be able to stand the heat in the summer or stand the snow in the winter.
Please.
Yeah, if I could just agree with David and Johnny. I can see holding buildings that are inconspicuous and gone in immersion exhibits, and that's perfectly appropriate. But I also can see Marsh Wall encapsulated in the Zurich Zoo in Switzerland, which is monumental, but compelling in its own special way, and much like the pyramids, I suppose.
All right, one more topic, and to squeeze into this this extra moment is 3 or 4 questions have come on the topic of the role of zookeepers or zoo staff more generally in the design process. The implication in the body of questions is that there's accumulated wisdom there. There's a certain degree of specialization and specialized knowledge that can inform the process. John Coe.
Well, it's very important that there be an inclusive process, and you have to insist on it. So that comes from your side and our side. But your responsibility is to arm yourself with the knowledge and experience to earn your place at the table. So we need you at the table, but you also have something you need something to contribute beyond what you've always done. In other words, if you come to the workshop and all you say is, we do it this way and we're not going to do it any other way, are you part of the solution or part of the problem? On the other hand, I've had keepers who came and said, you know, I've done a lot of research with mountain goats, and you know, if you want to herd a mountain goat, it won't go in a straight line. It'll take the first sig to the left and the first sig to the right, and so we need to design the raceways that way. Wow, it really worked. It really worked. So yes, a lot of people need to have a voice at the table, but you also have to have something to add to it other than tradition.